Okay. This video we're going to talk a little bit, just casually talk about some of the engine parts just to start getting an understanding of that. I'm going to concentrate mainly on the cylinder area. I want to get into the bottom a little bit because we're going to be doing that top overhaul we talked about first. I'll be concentrating mainly on the cylinder stuff. And now, don't get too panicked about taking too many notes at this point. Of course, I did send you a note page as we were kind of going through this, identifying some of the stuff. So you do have this to look at, that where I said we got some notes on that. And so this will be a little bit about cylinder identification and some of the parts and pieces. Right off the bat, when we are talking about the cylinder, here we have a cylinder here. Just very quickly, this cylinder here, you'll see it's got some blue paint on it here, where that identifies that that's a nitrided cylinder. Like I said, I'll be sending you some notes and information. We'll talk more in depth about this a little bit later on. But this particular one has got the blue here. That indicates that this is a nitrided cylinder barrel. So cylinder barrels come in basically 4 different types of surfaces on the inside of the cylinder barrel. Now I'm going to grab a little bit lighter one here so I don't have to lift these heavy things. And I've got one here where the cylinder head, which is made of aluminum, has a steel barrel that is screwed into that. And you can kind of see up inside there is where your valve seats. Valve seats are actually inserts where you got the aluminum head. You'll have a steel insert for both your intake and exhaust pieces in there. But back to the barrel, where that one was painted blue on the identifier, they're talking about this surface area here on the barrel itself being made of steel with the cooling fins machined into it and so on. And you got your flange down here. The nitriding is a surface hardening process where you can have plain steel barrels where the cylinder on that fin area would be indicated by just kind of an off gray color. The nitrided one, that's where they put the cylinder, especially the barrel, into an oven of ammonia gas, and at about 900 and some degrees for 3 days. It actually goes and it chemically changes the metal and surface hardening it down to a depth of about 20,000. It varies with time, and about 15 to 20 thousandths. Oh, we're back alive again here. All right. So we were just talking about the plain steel barrel, the nitrided barrel. And then there's also a repair process that was done, and it was also out in some brand new engines for a while. It was called chrome plating a cylinder. A chrome plated cylinder will be identified by an orange marking that's on the cylinder somewhere. It depends on the manufacturer whether this was actually a Pratt & Whitney barrel, so they chose to put where it's been chrome plated. And it's not like the chrome on the bumper of your car. It's called channel chrome. In fact, and you'll see in your book, you'll see a picture that looks something like this. Now let's make sure you can see that up there on the screen there. But so in your book, you'll see where they're talking to you about what chrome plating is about. But that's where they actually do, got the plating process going on, where it's, put in the chromic acid and the direct current applied for a certain length of time, builds up that cylinder wall. And then when they get to the certain dimension thereafter, they reverse the current, which causes the chrome to fracture, creating these little cracks and stuff in the chrome. And what they're doing there is they're simulating because we can't hone a chrome-plated barrel like we do a steel barrel, where we actually get in there and we scratch it. We put in these 45-degree scratches, and we'll talk more about that later. It's very important of that cross-hatching, they call it in there. But the chrome plating is simulating that the valleys and the little mountains that we need for dealing with ring seating and so on. So we'll get to that. Let me get this turned off here. Get that back off. So that's the chrome. And then there's a later process, because there was some problems with chrome plating, and so they came out with a later a process of chrome called cermochrome. And that was, when they did those on cylinders, that was identified by a double orange stripe. Okay. So as we mentioned, the barrel is screwed up into the aluminum head. And there's some other basic parts. You've got valve guide inserts, just like we had the seat, the steel seat that was up in the cylinder head, up in there with a tight fit. You've also got the guides that are, they get those guides and seats in there by heating this cylinder head up to around 500 degrees and putting these parts in the freezer. And so taking advantage of the coefficient of expansion of the aluminum, it expands. But then, so as soon as you get that seat in there and it touches that, then it starts swelling and locks itself in the cylinder head as well too. Yeah, then you've got your basic parts, so you got your valve guides there, and then you got your valves themselves that, of course, go in this way up in the cylinder head, and you got your intake and exhaust valves. One thing that's kind of fun is on one of the first quizzes I'm going to be giving you, we will have, at some point here, we'll have talked about how the intake valve is larger than the exhaust valve, and that's actually an FAA test question. So they're talking about not the stem size, but they're talking about that cross-sectional area running across the top of the valve. So this is actually an exhaust valve. You can see the exhaust products on it versus here's your intake valve. So the FAA test question asks, which valve is larger, the intake or the exhaust? And the answer, of course, is the intake valve is the larger valve, because we're talking about this cross-sectional area of the head of the valve up here. But on one of the quizzes I have, I always hope that somebody, hopes they miss that question, because I've got to drive home the point, out of one of those big marine diesel engines, I've got this intake valve that's out, and so I like to go sit at, whoever misses the test question, I like to go back and say, now which valve is larger? Is it the intake or is it the exhaust? And either way, whatever you're measuring, this valve's got the battle one on that, but I could kind of drive home that point of which valve is larger. Anyway, yeah, we got some of these big old marine diesel parts, because we used to have a marine diesel program housed in the hangar along with our aviation program, and when they left behind a whole bunch of parts, and so that was one of that big old intake valve was one of the parts that got left behind. Okay, quite often, what's of course driving our valves up and down in the cylinder, they're held in there by valve springs. And that'll be another test question that comes right out at the beginning is, why do we have more than one valve spring? So we typically have got a couple of valve springs up in here on each valve, and that's to eliminate valve spring surge is the answer to that FAA test question. But of course, up here, you got your push rods that are coming up here through the cylinder, and then you got your rocker arms that sit up in here that, of course, when the push rod pushes up, this pushes down on the where the valve stem will be poking up there, and I don't actually have it inside the guide or the bushing like I should, but drives that valve up and down for opening and closing the valve. I've got laid out over here on the table kind of a sequence of that so you can see it. So over here, I got your camshaft that's down in it. It lives on a Lycoming engine. It lives right on top of the crankshaft. So your crankshaft's, of course, in the center part of the crankcase. You got your camshaft. And typically there's some sort of a follower. And so this is on the regular 0320s that have been around for years. When they came out with the H2AD engines, they had more of a hydraulic type lifter that sat on the engine. And of course, as the cam spins, you got these lobes that drive this up and down, and then going up. And then, of course, there's a big old, for the purpose of the video, having a little bit bigger rocker arm that we can see there. So, and that's actually a FA test question. What connects the rocker arms to the camshaft, of course, is the push rod that you've got there. Okay. And as I mentioned, don't get panicked about trying to get some notes going about a blue cylinder's nitride and orange is ceramic or chrome or plain steel. I'll be getting that to you in a notes page a little bit later on. Okay, that completes this part one of this discussion of some engine parts.